Is Seth Rollins about to make a deal with the Bloodline? The theory nobody's talking about. Seth Rollins is running out of options, and desperate men make desperate deals. Think about what this man has been dealing with. Braun Breaker and the Vision have been hunting him relentlessly, week after week, an entire faction dedicated to breaking him down before he ever gets close to Roman Reigns' championship. Rollins is under siege, plain and simple, and right now he does not have the numbers to fight back. So ask yourself the question nobody wants to ask out loud. What happens when a proud, calculated competitor like Seth Rollins runs out of good options? He starts considering the bad ones. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Solo Sikoa's new Bloodline, a faction built entirely on fear, dominance, and overwhelming physical force, happens to be sitting right there as the exact kind of muscle Rollins would need to finally neutralize the Vision. Think about that possibility for a second. Seth Rollins, the man who wants Roman Reigns' championship more than anything else in this business, potentially aligning himself with the one group that could actually make that happen, at a price that might cost him something far more valuable than he realizes. Comment below right now and tell me if you think Seth Rollins is actually capable of making a deal like this. And stick around, because I'm breaking down exactly why this alliance makes sense, what it could cost him, and why there's a very real chance this entire thing is actually a long con nobody's expecting. Let's get into it. Let's start by properly understanding the position Seth Rollins actually finds himself in right now, because you can't evaluate a desperate decision without understanding the desperation behind it. Braun Breaker and the Vision have made Rollins' life an absolute nightmare. This isn't a single rivalry playing out through occasional confrontations. This is sustained, coordinated pressure from an entire faction, week after week, wearing him down physically and mentally at exactly the moment he needs to be at his sharpest, heading toward a shot at Roman Reigns' championship. Think about the math here. Seth Rollins, as talented and as dangerous as he is, cannot fight an entire faction by himself indefinitely. Numbers matter in this business. And right now, Rollins doesn't have anyone consistently watching his back the way the Vision has each other's. That's not a sustainable position for a man with championship aspirations, and it's exactly the kind of pressure that forces competitors into decisions they'd never consider under normal circumstances. Now let's talk about why Solo Sikoa's new Bloodline specifically becomes such a compelling option for Rollins, because on paper, this actually makes a strange kind of sense. Solo Sikoa's faction is built on exactly the kind of raw intimidation and physical dominance that could neutralize a group like the Vision. If Rollins is looking for muscle capable of matching Braun Breaker and company on their own terms, there are very few options on the entire roster more suited to that job than a faction specifically built around fear and force. And think about the strategic logic from Rollins' side. He doesn't need the Vision as friends. He doesn't need a long-term alliance built on trust. He needs a temporary solution to a very specific problem, a faction breathing down his neck, threatening to derail his path to the championship. Solo Sikoa's Bloodline represents exactly that kind of solution. Overwhelming force that could shut down the Vision's pressure campaign, buying Rollins the breathing room he desperately needs heading towards SummerSlam. But here's where this theory gets a lot more interesting, because nothing in this business comes free, and Solo Sikoa is not the kind of leader who extends protection out of generosity. If a deal like this actually happened, Sikoa would demand something significant in return, and given everything we know about the ongoing power struggle within the Bloodline, the most logical price would be information, access, a way inside Roman Reigns' camp that Sikoa doesn't currently have. Think about what that would actually mean for Seth Rollins. He'd essentially be agreeing to become a secret weapon, an informant operating inside enemy territory, feeding information back to Solo Sikoa about Roman Reigns' plans, his vulnerabilities, his inner circle's movements. That's not a simple alliance of convenience. That's Rollins agreeing to become an instrument of somebody else's much larger agenda in exchange for protection he desperately needs right now. Let's sit with what that arrangement would actually mean for Seth Rollins as a character, because I think this is the piece of the theory with the most long-term storytelling potential. Seth Rollins has spent his entire career being defined by his own ambition, his own calculated maneuvering, his own singular pursuit of championship gold on his own terms. Becoming an instrument of Solo Sikoa's larger agenda, essentially working for someone else's benefit rather than purely his own, would represent a genuine shift in who this character actually is. It's one thing to align with someone temporarily for mutual benefit. It's another thing entirely to become someone else's tool, someone else's informant, someone else's weapon aimed at a target that isn't fully his own. That kind of arrangement carries real emotional weight. Every week Rollins spends operating in that role would raise the same underlying question. How much of himself is he sacrificing to survive this current storm? And that internal conflict, if handled well, could genuinely define WWE storytelling for months, giving Rollins a much more complex, morally gray character arc than the straightforward, hungry challenger chasing a title story we've seen from him already. Now here's the twist worth considering, because I don't think we can evaluate this theory fully without asking the obvious follow-up question. What if Rollins getting close to Solo Sikoa isn't really about survival at all? Think about it from a different angle entirely. What if Seth Rollins, ever the calculated strategist, is deliberately positioning himself inside Solo Sikoa's camp not because he needs protection, but because he sees an opportunity to destroy the Bloodline from the inside? Gaining Sikoa's trust, learning the inner workings of that faction, understanding exactly where its weaknesses lie, all of it setting up a much bigger betrayal down the line, one that could finally dismantle the entire Bloodline power structure for good. That version of the story fits Rollins's established character far more comfortably than simply becoming somebody else's tool. This is a man who has built his entire career on being several steps ahead of everyone else in the room, on turning perceived weakness into calculated advantage. If he's willing to align with Solo Sikoa at all, it wouldn't be surprising if the real motivation running underneath that alliance is a plan to eventually turn the entire thing against him. Here's what makes this entire theory so fascinating regardless of which direction it actually goes. Both outcomes give WWE a genuinely compelling storyline to build heading into SummerSlam and beyond. If Rollins genuinely becomes Solo Sikoa's instrument, that's a redefinition of his character, a study in how desperation can compromise even the most fiercely independent competitors in this business. If it's actually a long con, that's a payoff that rewards patient viewers with exactly the kind of calculated, multi-layered storytelling that makes Seth Rollins such a compelling character in the first place. Either direction gives this entire situation staying power well beyond a single pay-per-view. Here's my honest take, and I want to know if you agree. Seth Rollins is running out of good options against the Vision, and that alone makes an alliance with Solo Sikoa's Bloodline a legitimately compelling theory worth taking seriously. But knowing Rollins' history, knowing how calculated and how many steps ahead he tends to think, I lean toward believing there's more going on beneath the surface than a simple desperate alliance. I think if this deal happens, there's a real chance we're watching the opening move of a much longer game. So here's what I want to know. Drop a comment right now and tell me. Do you think Seth Rollins actually goes through with an alliance like this? And if he does, do you believe it's genuine desperation, or is this the long con theory playing out exactly as I'm predicting? If this breakdown gave you something new to think about heading into SummerSlam, smash that like button, drop your prediction below, and share this with every wrestling fan who thinks Seth Rollins is smarter than everyone's giving him credit for right now. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because I'll be tracking every single development in this situation as we get closer to SummerSlam. This is Ring Rumble. I'll see you in the next one.